Brilliant. Thank you. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks again. My name is Rob Sugden. I'm Partnerships and Fundraising Manager here at Peabody, and joined with a couple of colleagues from the team, Faith, Melissa, and Zane. We all have the privilege of working on the Kerslake Community Award, which is a relatively new community grant for Peabody. We had our first round of it last September, October time. This will be the second time we've done it, and we've learned a bit from the last one. So it's kind of talked through for anyone that's been involved previously, we can tell you about some of the changes and things that we're working on with the fund. For anyone that's coming to this for the first time, this session is just to tell you a little bit more about what the idea behind the Kerslake Community Award is, how it fits into kind of the wider work of the Peabody Community Foundation, eligibility for that fund, and then the second part of the session, the really useful bit, I'm sure, as well. I'll hand over to Faith, and she'll take some kind of top tips and some ideas for having done this previously, where some of the applications kind of can really stand out to help you with making your applications. So I'm Partnerships and Fundraising Manager. I think I mentioned that. They are fundraising officer. We'll talk you through those bits. I think we've covered this in terms of what we've got there. Mentioned there'll also be time for a Q&A afterwards. Chances are, if you found your way to this webinar, you might know a bit about Peabody, either because you've worked with us in the past or you're a resident. But for anyone that isn't aware, Peabody is a housing association, one of the earlier kind of housing associations in the UK, with a long history of not just providing social housing, but also kind of having a philanthropic emphasis to the work we do. So we're not just about building homes and maintaining the homes that we build, but we have for a very long time run programs and initiatives and provided funding that supports a whole host of kind of community initiatives and aims, and that's what the Kerslake Award is all about. But Peabody, as a housing association, we're now one of the largest in the UK, certainly one of the largest in London. We manage 108,000 homes across London and the home counties. That's over 220,000 people living in those homes. And as I say, set up in 1862 by George Peabody, very much not just about housing, but everything that comes alongside housing to build healthy communities as well. And just some figures of kind of how we look to do that. We spend around £10 million a year in our community work. That includes the running of a number of community centres across London, our support of our community teams, but also includes funding and commissioning that we do with lots of different local organisations, and no doubt you've been involved with Peabody through some of those routes in the past. Last year we gave out about £200,000 in community grants to local organisations. Our Kerslake Award that kind of launched last year was part of that, but we run lots of activities. We support food pantries and food emergency work across the capital. And we continue to kind of build new homes and new communities and new facilities kind of alongside this. And most of the work, a lot of that work is driven through our own community foundation. So you have Peabody, the Housing Association, but you also have our charitable foundation, Peabody Community Foundation, which raises funds and administers funds to support projects and support people living in Peabody homes and communities. And you'll hear us like to talk about kind of projects that look to make people healthier, wealthier, and happier. That's kind of a core to our 3-year strategy that we're kind of right in the middle of at the moment. But it's also kind of the priorities that inform the Kerslake Award there as well. And we'll make these slides available. There is a link there to kind of the Peabody Foundation, our strategy and the work we do, which gives you kind of a good flavour of the type of work we support, the types of projects we work alongside. Having looked at some of the names of the organisations that are joining us today for this session, I already see great alignment between what you do and the priorities of your organisations and the work that we try to support. Now, the Kerslake Award is a really special award for us. Peabody's done community grants for a long time, but actually this particular community grant came out of the sad news that our chair, Lord Kerslake, passed away a couple of years ago. And Bob Kerslake was a very big proponent of communities and worked in kind of all levels of government, very senior in local authorities, but also had a great career as kind of trustees and chairs of various charities and groups, and a lot of impact in that work, but including being chair of Peabody. But very much kind of his ethos was about supporting communities, investing in communities, supporting grassroots projects and ideas to kind of flourish. And so when it came to discussions about how we could honour Bob and do things in his memory, everyone felt very strongly that a fund that supported those ideals was very much kind of the route that we wanted to go down to do that. And we have a panel that makes decisions about which grants to fund, and it actually has members of Bob's family that kind of join us and are part of that as well. So there's a big connection to the Kerslake family through this award as well, and that makes this a particularly kind of special one for all of us. But just to kind of, you've probably seen this from some of the guidance, but in particular this fund, which is £2,000 towards projects led by residents or that can focus on Peabody communities and has a focus on bringing community together, reducing loneliness, getting people active, where we can, improving mental health, supporting young people, but also kind of aligned to some of other kind of Bob's passions. There is a focus on this one around supporting people from becoming homeless and providing support to refugees, which were big causes that Bob was a big advocate for and chaired on. So what does that fund look like? It's a £40,000 fund annually that we administer 2 times a year. The fund that's just launched last week will be around £20,000 of that, and so supporting around kind of 10 to 12 projects in this particular round, and then we'll run it again in October, September kind of time. We'll talk a bit more about kind of timescales, but it's important that we kind of point out those 2 kind of spells of the year, because I know lots of people will kind of look to this funding to support Christmas and winter activities. As with any funding, you'll appreciate there's a kind of process of us having to kind of get the applications in, having to appraise them, then to kind of go through the process of getting that funding out. Actually, that kind of September, kind of when we run it, pushes it quite up towards kind of Christmas or festive projects and things like that, if you're doing things. So if people want funding to do something for Christmas, or that's a kind of, if still it's very early to be kind of talking about that, but it's probably, this is a good round, even if you're thinking of delivering things kind of later in the year, because once you've got the funding, there is 12 months to kind of run your project with it. We provide the funding, but we will also look to connect you up with members of our community investment team as well to see how else we can kind of add value to the projects that you're looking to do. So that might be to help you identify venues where you might be able to run it from. It might be that we can find some free or subsidised space, depending on where it is and what it is they're looking to do. We can certainly help you to promote your projects and get them out to kind of Peabody residents. We say we want you to kind of target Peabody residents and communities. We appreciate that you need some help to perhaps understand where those groups are and the best ways to reach them. So all of our comms channels and local kind of channels would be made available to support that with you. And just to note there as well that we will be launching an annual bursary in honour of Lord Kerslake as well, which will be smaller grants to individuals, particularly younger people, but also people perhaps going to career change, to support them with anything that might help them with career progression or education, those types of things. So if you see further kind of talk in between those periods of the Kerslake Award, it will be for our bursary scheme. So just getting into a little bit of the detail then, and what we're kind of looking to, we've kind of talked about the healthier, wealthier, kind of a happier theme. So just to give a bit of inspiration, or to give a bit of an idea of the types of projects that this fund can help to do. We've seen we're really keen to support things that bring communities together. So that might be one-off events. In the last round, we funded a music and mural kind of project. So there's going to be a day kind of in Cambridge in an area called the Lees, where you've got the community kind of coming together, and they're going to, the aim of the day is to create a big mural on a Peabody estate, but also in that people are going to bring up food and music and have a real kind of celebration of the community. We've also had projects that are getting younger people on the estate together to kind of make a young people's residence magazine that's a bit different, kind of the standard publications you might see kind of coming out from organisations like Peabody or other like housing associations. We've supported sports clubs, dance groups, older people's kind of sessions to bring people together. Anything that kind of has an ethos of getting people together. to have fun, to make connections in their communities, and to reduce kind of loneliness and isolation a little bit. Very much in the ethos of this program, as is anything that can kind of connect children and young people and families in. So whether that's training on new skills for young people, whether it's activities for young people, whether it's an inclusive kind of community event, kind of that earlier kind of example that is open to all of the family. Really keen to support those. We'll come on to it, but there are some caveats about who we can support to provide the children and young people projects, just because of some of the safeguarding aspects and some of the kind of due diligence on this side for this particular fund. And I mentioned it earlier. We're really keen to support more projects that kind of support people around risk of homelessness or support refugee groups. That is an aim of this fund. We didn't particularly have any applications that really kind of touched on those themes last time round, so it would be great to have some of those coming through on this fund, although we did support some financial inclusion type stuff, which is about helping people around money management or access to kind of money advice. So that had an element of kind of reducing that risk of homelessness. But yeah, anything that's about local support services, translation services, awareness raising projects for kind of underserved groups, very much keen to support those or to work with you to kind of craft those ideas. So in terms of who the fund's open to, we try to make this as easy and accessible a fund as possible. So you can apply for this if you're an individual with an idea and want to kind of see something happening in your community, and this could be the funding to kind of galvanize some of that. Very much kind of the ethos of this. If you're a Peabody resident, amazing too. Like we want to kind of get this funding into people who know how best to cater for their communities, and that's our residents. But also really keen to work with those local groups, residents associations and charities that are really embedded in those communities as well. Now, there's a big red line here, kind of an underline to kind of really stress this point as well. Like there are some caveats with this fund. It really is targeted at quite hyper-local, smaller groups and associations. So if you're a charity with an income of more than £100,000 a year, then this particular Peabody fund is not the one to kind of go for. We have others that we can look to connect you in that have kind of higher thresholds around this. This whole kind of income threshold was to try and kind of identify smaller charities that perhaps don't always kind of have as much chance with some of the funding, and that's kind of where we set it as. I think last year it was around £50,000, and actually we listened to the feedback, and that was too narrow and ruled out lots of organisations that could really benefit from this, but perhaps kind of just tipped over that. So we've kind of put that at about the £100,000 kind of mark as the threshold. If you're sitting kind of slightly either side of that, have a conversation with us. We can see what we can do. But as a guide, that's where we're trying to kind of put people on income threshold for your organisations, and all types of organisations that are constituted, community resident groups, registered charities, social enterprises, CICs, CIOs, the types of organisations we're really keen to kind of fund from a group's perspective. And we go into that a lot more in the detail in the guidance, which hopefully you've seen on the website. We can post a link in the chat to that kind of here as well, and we'll make sure that it's passed on to attendees as well afterwards. I say it's really flexible, and then have this long list of things that we have to be slightly mindful of in terms of kind of not funding through this fund, but we're kind of trying to kind of put this a bit more explicitly out there this time, because I think it was a little bit, we maybe didn't make it clear enough, and people took time and effort to kind of put together applications and then they weren't quite eligible, and we don't want to waste anybody's kind of precious time in that respect. So again, there are some organisations like local authorities, party political groups, commercial entities, or individuals that are looking for something kind of just to support themselves or their home or their business. This particular fund isn't for you. Again, Peabody has staff that we might be able to connect you with that can support those activities, and we do support many of those groups in different ways, but not through this particular fund. We also have some conditions around groups being in receipt of only one Peabody Small Grants Funds over the course of a 12-month period. So if you're in receipt of a Connecting Thamesmead Fund, some of our Islington kind of specific funding, or you've previously had a Kerslake Community Award small grant, we would ask that you wait 12 months to apply for that again, and we will only consider your application if all of the reporting and kind of wrap-up bits are kind of covered there as well. There are also some conditions around kind of having charity commission and accounts and those types of things, which are quite normal for kind of funders. But we set some of those out and just please, before you kind of fill your application in, just do have a check of the guidance to make sure that you're kind of meeting all of those or falling out of them. And if you're not sure, you can reach out to any of the team through our email, which we'll put up on here, but it's communitygrants@peabody.org.uk. The team will be really happy to clarify on that front. I think this is where I take a pause and hand over to Faith, who has the much more fun bit of talking a bit more about kind of how applications can really stand out and a bit of guidance on that front.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, so once again, Faith Neal, I'm fundraising officer at Peabody. Some kind of tips and tricks around the application. So like Rob said, we do try to keep it light touch. If you've had a look at the application form, it's largely a bit about who you are, especially if you're an organization, and just really kind of want to understand the project. But of course, in writing that, there's some tips to kind of set out a bit more. So as Rob also mentioned, a lot of this is kind of how can we benefit Peabody residents? So we don't have a specific percentage of Peabody beneficiaries we'd like to see. It really depends on the projects. But I can say the panel does like to see a significant amount of Peabody beneficiaries. Again, that's kind of something if you want to be connected with local lead and figure out, what's feasible and, how you can attract Peabody residents a bit more to your projects. We're happy to have those conversations to connect you with the appropriate teams. But yeah, ultimately, we do want to make sure that projects do benefit Peabody residents. Oh, sorry. Thanks, Rob. So also just a note as well, projects will, priority will be given to projects and activities led by Peabody residents. If not, we'll still just need to see essentially that the projects do have a connection to Peabody and the local community. So once again, we want to see some beneficiaries that are Peabody residents, but we also want to see that close connection to Peabody and the local community. If you have a stronger connection, obviously that kind of all ties in together. Stronger connection to the community, stronger connection to Peabody residents who could benefit from the project. Some other things to look at as well, we'll ask, there's a question about where you're planning to have your project take place. So that also, I'll say a top tip as well, is really helpful if you do put a postcode in there. But also, if you have a community center in mind that you'd like to use, in a couple of slides, we have some links and we can share that out as well. We have, as PCF, Peabody Community Foundation, we have about 100 community centers across London and home counties. So depending on where your project is going to take place, there might be a center that you can use and we can have those conversations. But that's quite helpful as well. Typically in a lot of those kind of busy community centers, those are areas where we do have a lot of Peabody residents, and that kind of helps as well with the promotion as well. We can put posters up in those community centers, but also again, they're hubs where Peabody residents tend to come to, so you'll have a better chance of having those beneficiaries there. And also something else to note in how we score applications. We do score applications based on community need and support, alignment to the core themes. So make sure, again, top tip, some of these things might seem very, very basic, but let me tell you, it really makes a difference in application. And generally, people reviewing applications can tell if you've read through the guidance or not. So just making sure, you kind of address how your project aligns to those core themes is really helpful. Again, it's a £2,000 grant. We want to make sure that this isn't too much work for applicants, but we also just want to make sure, can we clearly see where your project aligns to the community need? Do we clearly see how the project that you've proposed aligns to our core themes? And also, again, we'll look at the creative use of funding to connect to Peabody community. So really reinforcing that in here, but that close connection to Peabody communities is really important for your application. I'm happy to go to the next slide, Rob. Rob mentioned a couple of things that we funded previously. Your project does not have to be a copy of this. It doesn't have to be along the same lines, but just so you have an understanding of what our Peabody panel has seen before and the projects they've liked and have funded. We funded Global Action for Autism, who are doing parent carer coffee mornings. So they're kind of doing 2-hour workshops a week in Hammersmith and Fulham. They're doing things like doing jewelry making and art and sign language and coffee meetings, etc. We funded Education for Change, who are doing 90-minute financial literacy workshops in Southwark for 10 weeks. Another project we funded is Uprising Seniors Community Club, who are doing a program for seniors in Hackney and looking at different needs. So again, they've kind of assessed different needs that are needed in the area. So kind of educational life skills, IT skills, exercise sessions, et cetera, et cetera. And then Rob mentioned the music and mural event in Cambridge as well. So I mean, all of these projects I think are ones that, again, they're in Peabody areas, so they were able to explain that really well. Where they're planning to have their project take place, it also addresses a need in the area. If again, I'll keep saying this as well, we are very happy to help if you have any questions or if you want to make sure that your project aligns with the need in an area. So say if you want to do something in Hackney or something in Oxford and you want to just make sure that your project aligns with what the needs are in the area, reach out to us. We can connect you with a community investment lead who can help you out and kind of go through the project and go through your idea with you. Just make sure it's in alignment with what is needed in the area. Next slide, please. Again, so this is all quite basic, but really, really crucial information when it comes to creating a really good funding application. Good funding application is one, just making sure, again, is your project a clear fit for the fund? It might be a really good project. It might be something that's really beneficial, but if it's not in alignment with what our fund aims are, it's not likely to be successful. Also, things like being specific about your project details. Again, we don't want this to be a huge, huge bit of work for you. We do want to keep it light touch. It is, you don't have to write a whole essay on everything. A substantial paragraph that says exactly what you're doing, how you plan to do it. That's all quite key. So again, you don't have to go completely over the top with how much information you give, but I think just addressing those very basic details about what your project is. Another tip here is never assume what the reader knows. So, maybe for us, if we've had a conversation with you about your project, we might know some bits, but also remember that it's an outside panel outside of our immediate team, who are the panel members, who'll be looking at this project. We can try to provide a bit of context, but also just make sure you're being really specific. If someone else who didn't know anything about the project is reading your project explanation, are they going to know what you're talking about? Just making sure we have those details, when, how often you're planning to have your project take place, where it's going to take place. Also demonstrate you have a clear project structure. So making sure that you've explained really well and it's clear and it's feasible what your sessions and activities are going to look like. We do have a question as well about who will be leading the project and what kind of experience they have. So for example, if you're running a project for children with special needs or something like that, we just want to see what are the qualifications that the people who are leading the project have, things like that. Any evidence about needs, gap, demand. So this is where that kind of engagement piece comes in. Again, we want it to be appropriate to the amount of funding that you're getting, but it's helpful to know how this project came about. So is it something that's already ongoing? Is it something that you've had conversations with people in the community about? What's the need? What's the desire? What's the demand for the project? Again, just something quite simple, but if you explain that clearly, that's really helpful. Thinking about sustainability. So is this something that you plan to continue doing? Is this something that's ongoing? Is there any other kind of support for beneficiaries after the project ends? Things like that are really helpful to know, is if it's a kind of one-time thing or if it's something that's a bit more sustainable, if it's something that will have a lasting benefit. That's quite helpful as well. The budget is one I love to talk about budgets. I'm not necessarily a numbers person, but let me tell you, budgets are really, really important. You don't have to be a proper mathematician. I think just making sure that everything's clear and appropriate. We do ask if you're paying employees to make sure that they're being paid the living wage. So that's £13.85 in London. It's slightly less outside of London. But that's something that we'll ask if you're paying your employees the living wage. But yeah, just being really clear with the budget, just making sure, let's say you're applying for the full £2,000. You can have a look at the application and our application guidance, which we can send as well. But there'll be questions about, how much, you're planning to spend on, say, overheads, or how much you're spending on rent, or how much you're spending on supplies, how much you're paying staff members, et cetera, et cetera. Just making sure that, okay, I've written the number in. Does it make sense? Does it all add up to the £2,000 I'm asking for? Also, a question we'll ask as well, if you have secured any other funding, or if you're planning to have any other funding. So if your project is, say, £3,000, you're getting £1,000 somewhere else, or you're self-funding that £1,000, making that clear as well, so we can understand you're applying for £2,000. This is how you're planning to use the money that we'll potentially give you, and where the other money that's needed in the budget's coming from. Also, looking at suitable proposed monitoring procedure. This can be light touch, but it's really important to know how you plan to make sure that your project is a success and that you've thought about that. So if that's kind of doing surveys, feedback forms, etc., it's helpful if you have an idea of what you're planning to do in advance. Also looking at suitable proposed outcomes. We've noted sometimes less is more. If you're thinking, I'll have the best chance of getting funding if I'm going to reach 500 residents, that might not entirely be feasible depending on what your project is. So just making sure, what you're proposing is realistic and it's suitable for the amount of funding that you're getting. And last but not least is a well thought out risk assessment. We can provide a template, but just kind of making sure we have an understanding that you've thought about the risk involved and kind of any procedures that need to take place for this project to run well and to be risk managed. Next slide, please, Rob. Some tips and resources. There's a lot of links on this, so we can send the slides around so you can see all of this, but all of the funding application is online. We have two separate applications. So one's for individuals, if you're applying to the fund, the other is for constituted groups. We do also have on our website application guides. So this is, there's again, one for individuals, one for organizations, as it's two separate forms. So this has all of the questions, each of them has all the questions that are in each application form. So you can draft your application. We really recommend doing that. The web form that we have online right now doesn't allow you to save your work. So please do use this application guides. You can kind of copy and paste it into Word or whatever you use to kind of draft your document. Fill in the answers, read through it, proofread it, and then you can copy and paste it into the web form. That's what we really do recommend. Again, it's all on our website. We also have a lot of resources. So I mentioned before the potential to use a community space. So you can have a look at our website. We have a list of community spaces. You can reach out to us at communitygrants@peabody.org.uk, and we can kind of link you in with the team who can help you kind of identify maybe a space that would be suitable for your project. We also have information online about our community investment strategy and program. So in addition to your project being in alignment with our kind of fund aims, you can learn a bit more about what we do as Peabody Community Foundation and kind of work that we've done, kind of research we've done with residents as well to kind of understand what the needs are in the areas. And once again, all this information is available on our webpage, which we can put a link to shortly, but we also have a risk assessment and budget templates that you can use as well. Really trying to be as helpful as possible as we can and make this, again, as easy of a process for applicants. So also, I'll say this as well, we're quite happy to get any kind of feedback on how we can make this process a bit better, how we can better communicate information. Very happy to hear about that, even if it's constructive feedback, shall I say. This won't have an impact on your project or anything or your proposal, but we do want to make this, as efficient as we can for people who are interested in this fund. Yeah, next slide, please. I think this is my last slide, but not least, it's the timeline for this fund. So applications opened up 1 week ago. They will be open for a full month, so they close on the 30th of May. We've said at 11:59 p.m., just to be clear, you have till the very end of the 30th to submit your application. Obviously, we have our Q&A right now. We have a Q&A on Tuesday as well. It'll be in a similar format, so if you've attended this one, you don't have to feel the need to come to that one as well. But if you have any other questions that you want to bring up, feel free. So after May, we'll have some shortlisting and due diligence that we do internally in June with a panel meeting in July. So again, the panel's made up of residents, Peabody staff, and a member of the Kerslake family. They'll make all those decisions, and we're aiming to have all of our decisions out to all the applicants by the week commencing the 20th of July. Which means that projects can then take place from September 2025 onwards. This kind of gap, just to explain, if you're awarded funding, it does take a little bit of time we get the contracts out to you. You have about a month to get those contracts back to us, and then we have finance processes. So just keep that in mind as well when you're developing your timeline. So like Rob said, it might seem like very far in advance to think about a project happening at Christmas time or in December. But yeah, projects can start from September 2025 onwards. And again, that's kind of dependent on kind of the process, how fast people are getting their contracts and back to us and documents needed for getting the payment process as well. Yeah, there you go. Go ahead, Rob. Would you want to wrap this up?
Thank you, Faith. I know we've covered a lot there, and at pace, but we wanted to make sure that we had some time for discussion for those of us that are kind of joining on the call to move to that afterwards. But I think some key points are that it's open now. Get your applications in. There's the website to do it. Um, uh, you might have covered this, apologies if I missed it. We would definitely steer you to the website. We're looking at ways we can improve this and our kind of grant submissions so that is an ongoing project. So at the moment, the website is what it is. We would heavily suggest you kind of do your application on the Word document and then bring it to the website and kind of copy and paste it. And it's not something where you can kind of start your application and save it midway through. Yeah, do it that way through the website. If you're having any problems at all with uploading things, if you've got attachments, those types of things that aren't kind of working for you, we will respond on that community grants website, like email stuff into us. If you can't kind of get it to us through the website, it will get picked up. But the idea of the website is we can kind of hold it all in one place and try and make it as easy as possible to get in there. And there is this separate application form for whether you're an individual or you're an organisation. So do have a think about which one is you. If you are an individual who runs a business, you have a training organization or something like that, you're probably better going down the organization route if you kind of fit into kind of two of those categories. There are slightly different asks around there, and we'll pick up in the questions. Just for those that will kind of be doing this on the recording here today, so there were questions around some of the health and safety assessments and having certain kind of insurances and permissions. If you're an individual and you're applying for this fund and it's the first time that you're doing some of this, we would not expect you to take out those things. And we explain this a bit in the guidance on the website. We wouldn't expect you to take out insurance or kind of to do a full risk assessment before you know that you're getting the funding. So it is okay in your application to kind of, there are one or two documents that you don't have yet to say forthcoming depending on the funding. So we can kind of work with you on that one as well. We don't want anybody to go to any costs or any kind of big extremes or lots and lots of work for an idea. At this point, we want to kind of get your submissions and your ideas in, and then we can work with you and provide templates and those types of things afterwards if you need them. And we've kind of given the thumbs up on your idea. So don't want that to put anybody off. That's definitely something that we can kind of work with. Or if you want to pull that stuff together and it's helpful in your thinking, but you haven't done one before, give us a shout. We can provide you with a template that we kind of use in Peabody. I'm very happy for people to use those. There is lots in the guidance and things like that as well that we've put there. But yeah, I think the other point is that do reach out. And if you want to try an idea out with us, you can get in touch with the team there. All across London, Peabody has a number of roles called community investment leads. So if we have a big presence in a borough, I think we have about 12, 14 kind of community investment leads that kind of working across London who are kind of go-to contacts for exactly this. You've got an idea of a project or something you want to do in a Peabody community, kind of bounce ideas around with them. You might already be in touch with that person. If you are, definitely have a chat with them before you kind of put in your application. If you come to this for the first time and you'd like to be put in touch with who that person is for the area in which you want to work, get in touch on that email address. Tell us about where you've got an idea of doing things. We can then set you up and have a chat, and they might be able to give a few extra pointers to kind of help craft some of those responses that Faith was talking about. And if you are trying to think about, well, I've got this brilliant idea, but I don't know where to kind of run it from a community kind of Peabody venue, that link that Faith shared that has all of Peabody's kind of community facilities. So that's a really helpful one that might help you kind of think about where you might run something. And as a general rule, there's a good chance that if we've got a community centre in that area, we've also got quite a high stock of kind of Peabody residents kind of living in and around that place. So they might provide a guide of some kind of areas where we've got lots of Peabody residents. But if you're Lewisham based, you really want to get something in Lewisham, but you're not quite sure where to kind of target it to meet those things, again, give us a shout. We can try and kind of point you in the right way of things. I think this is where we're going to kind of go on to the Q&A. So thank you for people that have been posting questions. Thank you for putting the hands up. I'm going to propose we stop the recording now, and then we can kind of open it up